Only ceremony can season us now. Now is the season for ceremonies.
I am a Roman citizen.
Three rights formed the backbone of Rome's relations with her allies. There was the ius commercium, the commercial right, which meant that they could have a free trade with the rest of the Roman world. Second was the ius migrationis, the right of migration, that if they wished to migrate to another town, they could do so and be accepted as citizens. And finally, there was the ius connubii, the right of marriage, which meant that they could marry anyone within the Roman world.
I am a centurion deployed to Jerusalem.
The empire leads to the religion of conquest. The Romans were successful until they were conquered themselves.
This human being is God's son. Really?
A faith that sprang from brown, indigenous, colonized peoples. Faith born on the underside of empire in the context of oppressed peoples.
If God is incarnate in the natural world, and we are killing the natural world, are we killing the body of God?
All men are endowed by our Creator, right to the liberty and the pursuit of happiness.
Look, we have slain the forests, thou and I, soiled the bright streams and murked the very sky, crushed the glad hills and shocked the quiet stars with roaring factories and clanging cars. Fool, serving, I have slaved thee. Master fool, to forge the sword, nor, no, the sword should rule, to make the engine blind, that it must lead fast and yet faster on the race of greed. I still am king, thy king in more than name. Lo, I am Moloch, crowned and throned in flame, holding thee slave by lust of thy desire, calling thy firstborn to me through the fire.
Refuse to call industrial civilization into question. We can have a living planet and the consumption that's killing the planet, can't we?
What civilization has been doing for its 10,000-year campaign, running through soils, rivers, and forests, as well as metal, coal, and oil. Now, the oceans are almost dead, and their plankton populations are collapsing. Populations that both feed the life of the oceans and create oxygen for the planet. What will we fill our lungs with when they are gone? The plastics with which industrial civilization is replacing them?
Plastic outweighs plankton 48-1. Imagine it were your blood materials, chemicals, but physical gunk until there was 10 times more of it than you.
What metaphor is adequate for the dying plankton? Cancer? Suffocation? Crucifixion?
We've decided that oil is bad for us, so we need an alternative motive power. What could be better than electricity? Clean, easy to access, non-polluting. We can use electricity to drive ourselves into a bright, clean future with no adverse effects on ourselves or our environment.
Batteries need cobalt, and right now our car batteries are consuming around 100,000 tons of cobalt annually. Demand for it has grown by 13% per annum for the last 10 years and is still rising. And the biggest source of cobalt, Africa, with half the world's supply sourced in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The price of cobalt at $80,000 a ton is forecast to double in the next 5 years.
20 to 30% from artisanal and small-scale miners working by hand. This involves digging rough shafts to extract cobalt ore in a desperate scramble to get at it by any means possible.
And commonly, through unregulated ad hoc markets. Scrutiny is almost impossible in a country as vast as the DRC, where desperate poverty and unemployment drives an opportunistic need to earn money from any source under any conditions.
But to be in a state of constant forgetfulness, ours is an economy of ghosts, of deliberate blindness.
They came to Jericho, and as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great number of people, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the highway side begging. And hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to call out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many of the people kept telling him to be quiet, but the man continued to call out all the louder. Is earth only seen by those whose sight has been returned? What would an earth resurrection look like? Admitting we are blind?
Wherever there is oppression, there is resistance. That is true everywhere and has been forever. The resistance is built body by body from a tiny few, from the stalwart, the brave, the determined, who are willing to stand against both power and social censure.
Theoretically, the human race as a whole could face our situation and make some decisions, tough decisions, but fair ones that include an equitable distribution of both resources and justice, that respect and embrace the limits of our planet.
But none of the institutions that govern our lives from the economic to the religious, are on the side of justice or sustainability.
We're up against a system that is not only unjust, but insane. A culture of resistance must collectively face the layers of horror embedded in history, the daily acts of sexual sadism that comprise slavery, conquest, and rape, the knowledge that these acts are not the mistakes of confused, tragic children. Forgive them or not, they know what they do.
A culture of resistance believes in resistance because no amount of love or compassion or earnest education, no shining example of communal sustainability or individual self-respect has ever stopped the power.
Continent by continent, sustainable and egalitarian cultures have been wiped clean off the map, mere smudges of history that stood in the way of wealth. And the individuals who led them, brave, self-respecting, stalwart, took their place at the hanging end of a noose or beneath the heavy bodies of the hateful.
Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will, wrote Frederick Douglass.
And he began to speak to them in parables.
No es caravana, es un dolor que camina.
We know that relying solely on argument, we wandered for 40 years politically in the wilderness. We know that arguments are not enough and that political force is necessary.
I will resurrect on the third day.
There is hope for our worn and weary planet, but to qualify as hope, it must apprehend the facts. Without reality, hope is only a story for grown-up children. The people, animal, vegetable, and mineral, being consumed, don't have the luxury of fairy tales.
The privileged doing the consumption seem content to accept a happily ever after of wind, solar, and recycled tote bags. And the powerful are pleased that no one is threatening their conversion of the last of the living biomes into their own private wealth. Hope, real hope, is for the brave, because hope's only true action is to be that threat.
A culture of resistance is the mitosis of those demands, where the twin strands of pain and courage are triggered into life. As every living cell carries the message, we want to live, so too a culture of resistance is a determined miracle. However long the odds, life will live and people will fight.
What authority have you to do these things? They said. Who gave you the authority to do them?
I was not aware when I was born that I was born unto a battlefield.
But now I know. I can see how we were fooled, tricked into believing that shiny, sprawling suburbs and industrial zones and manure lagoons and mines and drilling rigs were our new habitat.
I can see now We were blinded by fossil fuel barons and captains of industry into thinking that cars and planes would replace the earth under our feet, even the clean air that we breathe.
And I can see many others waking up to the reality we face in this desperate moment in time. I see their grief, their horror, their determination, their fragile hope as they realize that they are not alone and that their actions and words still matter, still make a difference.
And I see them look around, searching for ways their energy and voice can be of use, resolutely joining in the struggle for a possible future.
So now I know I was born unto a battlefield, but in this battle, I am not alone.
With millions and millions of fellow humans, I am heeding the call of a different destiny.
Try telling yourself you are not accountable to the life of your tribe, the breath of your planet.
The task is not only to bind up the victims beneath the wheel, but also to put a spoke in that wheel.
Some people brought to him one that was deaf and almost mute, and they begged Jesus to put his hand on him. Jesus took him aside from the crowd quietly, put his fingers into the man's ears, and touched his tongue with saliva. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to the man, "Ephphatha," which means be opened. The man's ears were opened and his tongue was released, and he began to talk plainly.
A private oil company wants to build a pipeline that would cross the Missouri River less than a mile away from the Standing Rock Reservation. And if we don't stop it, it will poison our river and will threaten the health of my community when it leaks. My friends and I have played in the river since we were little. My great-grandparents raised chickens and horses along it. When the pipeline leaks, it will wipe out plants and animals, ruin our drinking water, and poison the center of community life for the Standing Rock Sioux.
We are good at camaraderie. We humans, we are loyal to our nations, to our cities, to our schools, to our sports teams. We love building teams and connections around these common elements, however artificial they may be.
But in truth, we are more united by our resources than almost anything else in our lives. What would change if we enunciated some of these resource connections, owned them, even celebrated them? What would it mean if, along with our other community identities, we also wore our watership citizenships with pride?
There are millions of potential water kindred out there, depending on the same life-giving and essential resource we are. Connecting to them, uniting with them, fighting alongside them, and being grateful for their fights could be a huge step toward a new connection-based worldview.
So here is my new level of citizenship based on Clear Creek, the waterway nearest to my home. The people who connect to the tributaries upstream from me keep me safe, and in return, I take care of the water for all of the millions of people downstream. What does your water pyramid look like? You, the elementary forces of all beings in their ease and struggle, whose direction and bubbles of cracking, cackling laughter we so need now to relearn and just let be. Come, sit, teach and dance like a jubilee of trees and bees and light. Like even the colonial monstrosity of Christianity can be returned to its knees and basic posture of receiving from the ancestry of the skies and the soils and their leaves, the volcanic fires and the sun and the royals of river waves rolling to the seas. Thank you. Amen.